It's 2026 and everything is new. We've got new rules, new teams and new names on the grid. Most of all, and most exciting for me, we've got new cars. Let's go and take a look at them. Well, the most exciting car so far in the first day of pre-season testing is this, the brand new Audi. And it looks nothing like the Audi in the launch photographs or that they ran in Barcelona in the shakedown sessions. And you can see, looking at the front wing, we'll come and have a closer look. You can see on the front wing, they've gone from a single actuator to twin front wing adjustment actuators. That's a big change and something they'll have planned for a while. But the big thing everybody's talking about, you can see that the traditional side pods have completely vanished and been replaced by what most people are calling zero pods. Now, this is a side pod approach that was pioneered by Mercedes a few years ago, when the previous set of regulations were introduced. And here you can see how it almost looks like it's got no side pod duct at all. But it looks actually, that's quite interesting. The back of the Audi there getting a bit hot, some scorch marks on the rear bodywork, so perhaps a little bit of you can smell it as well. Oh, there's a real burning smell in the air now off the back of that Audi as it's come in. So this is testing, clearly some issues to be worked out for the Audi, but the development on this car has been absolutely sensational since the shakedown run in Barcelona. And as we come around here, you can see the problem that Audi have created. They really don't want anyone to get a good look at this car. Every time they're putting a human wall in front of the garage to be able to prevent you from taking too close a look at what's happening. And as you can see, a lot of backs of mechanics' heads. But that new side pod concept is huge, but there are some other really, really interesting details on this car. One jumped out at me in particular on the front of the floor. We need to get a better look at that before I tell you much more about it. So stay tuned over the duration of this test and into the second test next week. But I think there's a lot more to learn about this car. And this is one of the real sensations of F1 2026 already. And Audi hasn't even started its first race in Formula One yet. Well, from the brand new manufacturer in Formula One, Audi, to a brand new team, Cadillac, and their new livery that everybody's talking about, which makes the car in some senses a little bit hard to see. But here you can take a look at, now I'm winding you up, the Cadillac's actually out on track now, and it's a really good car to take a look at. I think a lot of people are writing Cadillac off a bit early because come down and look at here. The car is really quite technically interesting. You look around the front wing, you can see these vertical elements on the footplate of the end plate. That's this bit here. These are really quite interesting. Nobody else has got two of these. Nobody else is playing that. And you can see the shape, that outwashing shape. That's going to be a bit of a trend this year in Formula One, as is how teams are actuating their front wings, which are now movable. And we're going to have a closer look at that in the next few days. So we'll come back to that and this car when we can actually take a closer look at it. But for me, the Cadillac team doesn't seem like a new team. There's a huge amount of experience here and a huge amount of interesting design features on the car. So when we get a closer look at that, it's well worth tuning in. But let's go and have a look at a rather bluer car. Something new, something blue and pink. The Alpine, for me, is one of the more interesting cars in the field. I mean, they're all really, really interesting. But Alpine, because they didn't really build a new car last season, have spent more time, more energy, and because of their championship finish last year, more time in the wind tunnel in CFD, developing this design. And it's got some really fascinating features. But you have to look quite hard to see some of the detail. And the team aren't being particularly free in letting us have a really close look at it. But we're going to, but just wait for it, because I think this team has got a lot to prove. But one feature that really jumps out to me is just ahead of the rear wheel, and hopefully you'll be able to see this in a photo I took earlier, because the team really don't want us to look too closely at it. You can see an almost double-decked section to the rear floor just ahead of that rear wheel, and a few teams are doing that, including Cadillac, but Alpine's is probably the most extreme interpretation, so there's a lot more to come from a lot of teams in that area. There's so much new. No two cars on the grid are alike. And if you want to ask me who's got what car concept, there's 11 different car concepts on the grid. You've got the Haas concept, for example, which looks quite conventional for a team that we're so used to seeing as being really innovative early in the season. But the more you look at these cars, the more little details you start to notice. Have a look at the footplate on the end of the front wing end plate, and the Haas shape is completely different to any other team on the grid. They've clearly spent a lot of engineering time on that. But the more detail you look at the car, I mean, from where I'm standing, for the first time, I can see right into the sideboard. You can see how laid back that heat exchanger is as you look towards the rear of the car. Really interesting design, and Haas is one of the teams to use quite a lot of centerline cooling. So if you look up at the roll hoop on the car, you can see that A shape in the middle. The bit in the middle of that A shape is what's going into the Ferrari engine at the back. All the bits around it on either side and that little segment at the bottom, those are all cooling inlets. And what Haas is doing with the cooling is completely different to what Ferrari are doing. We'll take a look at that in a minute. One car that everybody's talking about at this point of the pre-season is the brand new Aston Martin. And as you can't see, the car is a hugely innovative design and one that the team don't want anyone to get too good a look at. As you can see here, though, it's having a few problems on the first day of testing. That's not unusual, and particularly for an innovative design. We will take, though, a really close look at that car in the coming days and weeks, so stay tuned for that. Racing Bulls and Red Bull have the new Ford-branded but Red Bull-developed power unit in the back of the cars. Now, Racing Bulls, it's all quite quiet there, and I'm wondering if the Italian team has taken an extended lunch break. So far, so good for this team. A lot more to learn about the car, though. They've had a lot of fiddling with it, and there are some interesting details on it, but I wonder if there's a lot more to see on this car, which they haven't quite yet unleashed. We'll come back to it. The newest of the new things on display at this new season is this, the Williams, and it's the latest version of the Williams family of cars. Now, we can see the cars come in, but this is really the first opportunity that we've had to look at this car, because they didn't run in Barcelona and they only released a single photo of the car's official shakedown. There's some really interesting details on the car. Look at the front wing end plates. You've got some really interesting sticky outy bits. No front brake cooling scoop, similar to Mercedes. And there is, of course, a Mercedes engine in the back of this car. But this car is another car that's had a lot of development time and energy invested into it. It's also quite loud. And that's one big thing that's changed for 2026. With no MGU-H's on the cars are significantly louder. And I hope you heard what I had to say there. But as you come around this side of the car, you can actually see some of the lovely detailing on that front wing end plate. And that's part of what you might see from a really involved wind tunnel development program, where the team has got a bit more time to spend than some of its rivals. But as you may notice, Williams is a long way up the grid, much further up the grid than they used to being, next door to Ferrari, which means that big wind tunnel allocation that Williams are used to having, well, they don't have it this season, do they? It's gone away. They've got a pretty average amount of time in wind tunnel and CFD, but they didn't develop a new car last year, so that gave them a bit more resource to bring to this year's car. So it could be quite an interesting car to see how it actually runs. And of course, it was very late to the start of pre-season. It's always worth taking a look at what Red Bull Racing has come up with, and we will be taking a much closer look at what they've come up with this season in a few days' time. But have a look here. You can see the wheels of the car. They almost look like practice wheels with those inserts in the middle. Well, there was a late rule change at the start of the 2026 season, whereas previously it was thought that you'd be able to see the wheel rims and the wheel covers of previous seasons had gone away. There was a late rule change, and now teams have to design wheel covers for their cars. But unlike previous seasons, each team designs its own wheel cover. And so you can see here, this is Red Bull's solution. And not all of them are necessarily the same as the others. And there are aerodynamic gains to be had, but we haven't really explored that yet. Ferrari is one team that everybody always talks about. And here we get a very good look at the back end of the Ferrari. You can see some of the beautiful, intricate aerodynamic elements around the rear of the diffuser. And this is an area that every team is working on much harder than normal. And as we see the car come back towards us, you can see other areas that are quite important, like ahead of the rear wheel. Look at those elements there. They've actually changed one of those for today, the first day of testing in Bahrain. They've changed the cutouts ahead of the rear wheel of the car, and it is just a generally interesting design. But we do hear that Ferrari has an awful lot more to come in terms of upgrades in the second Bahrain test, or possibly even by the end of this test. So keep an eye on that one. Down here at Mercedes, this is the car that many people want to get a closer look at. Not always easy, but is also the car that many people believe to be the strongest in the 2026 field. I think it's a little bit early to make such wild judgments as that. We really don't know who's good and who's not good at this point, because the teams are all running their own test programs. But what we do know is there's some really interesting technical detail on this car, particularly around the nose and front wing, which, as you can see, are not currently fitted to the car. But the front wing is picked up on the middle element, and front wings is something that we need to take a closer look at. So we are going to be having a really deep dive on front wing design in 2026 on a future issue of Tech Talk. So do stay tuned for that. Well, where best to finish when looking at a bunch of new cars than looking at an old world champion? McLaren, who won last year's World Championship, had the smallest amount of wind tunnel development and the smallest amount of CFD development time while developing this car. But McLaren, with its shiny new wind tunnel, does have the fastest development pace of any team on the grid. At least they did last year and the year before that. And their developments were effective. Now, the car is in pretty similar configuration to when we saw it when it first rolled out. However, there are still some really, really interesting design details. For example, have a look at the front suspension. McLaren switching from their pull rods front suspension design, which they've used for a while, to a push rod front suspension. And between those push rods, the number 1 for Lando Norris as world champion. And that is also going to be a factor. Right now, the engine covers off at the back of the car, and Mercedes' new 2026 power unit is exposed. And that power unit is the centre of a lot of attention, not least because a lot of people expect it to be really, really competitive. Will it be? Well, we'll just have to find out as the rest of this test goes on and as we get towards the first race of the year in Melbourne, Australia.